Did you hear about a recent event that was held in my area called Koala Conversations? Well, I attended. Have you been wondering, well, what went on there? I mean, what gets talked about at a forum like this? Well, in today's video, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the parts of the forum that really resonated with me. It was a huge day. It would take me hours and hours and hours just to recap every single one of the conversations because it was a full day. But look who else was here. Hello, good to see you here.
I brought some koala poo for you, but I actually lost it.
Oh no, that's so funny. Tom and Wendy from Vision Walk Eco Tours were there as well. It was so great to see so many people packed in to talk about koalas. We were in one of the lecture halls at the Southern Cross University in Lismore, and just look at these beautifully painted koala statues. Oh, they are so divine. Not too bad on the hands. The feet aren't quite anatomically correct, but we'll forgive them on that one. Now, let's have a little bit of a look at where we were, because I think it's really interesting just to show you the venue here. There's a little bit of a map, and as we're scrolling up, so this is the Southern Cross University in Lismore. The Friends of the Koala Hospital is just at one of the outskirts of the university, but just look at all the koala habitat that is on those university grounds. There's quite a thriving koala colony that lives on this area that the university has been built on, and there's a lot of environmental science units and courses that are taught here. All right, let's have a look at what was on the agenda. There were so many presentations, and most of them were quite short, so it kept moving. So we looked at koala monitoring, we looked at koalas, fire and rainforest, protecting koala habitat through private conservation agreements, yay. We looked at what's happened with the chlamydial vaccines in the area, this great presentation on the Northern Rivers koalas by Dan Lunny. I'll be talking about that one. Caring for country along the Burraby songline. I'll be talking quite a bit about this one as well. An update of 25 years habitat restoration, key lessons learned from impacts of the floods that happened in 2022, and some studies that have been done on a particular IGA to inform management of koalas. Then we moved into regional koala strategy development, creating regional approaches, documenting past and current koala habitat restoration activities, monitoring of koalas in a particular area, the Richmond Range, and ending up with a panel discussion on how can the Northern Rivers work together to save their koalas. Whew, you might agree with me. That was an absolutely huge day, and I'm still processing some of what I learnt. Now, everything that I put onto YouTube is always going to be completely free, but I couldn't do what I do without the amazing support that I want to give a huge shout out to so many people who are behind what I do. Businesses sponsor my calendar, people adopt koalas with the In the Loop adoption, the ever-growing Patreon family. I can't believe the amount of support that I get from them. People just donate money and even volunteer to help me with stuff. Thank you, everyone. And I want to acknowledge the Widjabul Waiable people of the Bundjalung Nation, on whose land I live, work and play. if you can't afford to put money into helping me, please don't ever worry about that. Make sure that you've subscribed, that you leave comments, that you hit that like button as hard as you can, and share my work out. Now, let's just have a little bit of a look at the beginning of the day and the setting. So here I am outside the building, which is the hall that we were in. Few people milling about, everybody just arriving. You can see all of that beautiful eucalypt habitat right outside the building there. And here's another one of these gorgeously artwork covered koala statues. They really are rather lovely. I notice that that one does have toes on their feet. They just don't have the fused toe. There's that hall, seats lots and lots of people. Another statue. These were started down in Port Macquarie, I believe. I remember seeing them down there some years ago. So we were feeling very koala-y, like we've even got a little koala there sitting in that bit of eucalypt branches. All right, I'm going to start by talking about this presentation and another one that I'm going to kind of put together to a degree, because Dr. Andy Baker talked about some research that's been done into the practices of using a regular fire maintenance to create more resilience and stronger habitat to go forwards with particularly looking at climate change, but also something that a lot of people don't actually realise is that our First Nations people, they regularly used fire to shape the landscape. Our First Nations people were not just hunters and gatherers that were just wandering about the landscape. They were actually ecologist farmers who were actively making sure that our landscape was protected and robust to cope with all kinds of weather conditions and to grow the strongest flora that would support our fauna in the best ways. So this presentation, I was just riveted by what we met and saw in this particular one. So what's really important is that eucalypts don't regenerate under a dark rainforest mid-story. And one of the things that often happens in this area is that we get eucalypt forests begin growing, but we get these mid-stories that grow up, and at first they can actually be quite helpful and protective. But over time, if they're not managed, then they actually starve the eucalypts of water and nutrients. The soils can become unfavourable because they can become too acidic. And if the mid-story becomes too dense, it can actually begin to foster a particular bird, which is a native bird, but these bell miners, if they invade an area that should be a eucalypt forest area, they will predate on the birds that should be there, and we get a completely unbalanced ecosystem. One of the most important things that we're looking for in our ecosystems is diversity. So what we can see here is that if these rainforest pioneers take off, the diversity drops. And just look at the difference between the left and the right side. With regular fire, there's robust koala eucalypts growing there instead of these rainforest pioneers. And there's nothing wrong with rainforests. It's just that rainforest is not what we are looking to have our koalas living in. As well as this particular presentation, we had this fantastic presentation a little bit later through the morning by Trent Evans, who is a First Nations man working with the Jargon Alliance, and the data that they presented, the photos that they presented, the yarns that he gave us about what is going on just struck home to me. And I have reached out to this alliance and am hoping to start to get some First Nations practices incorporated into the management on my own property here. When we talk about climate change, this is an amazing little pictorial representation here. The amount of rain that we were getting as mean annual rainfall back in 1985 to 95 compared to how it then went from the 10 years from 95 to 2005, and now look at how it has dropped. Now, we then, of course, as you know, in 2022 had like the most massive rainfall and huge flood. But these become very complex conversations where we've got the degradation of the forests and we have periods that are too dry and then too wet. So one of the things that we really need is to try and help our ecosystems cope with climate change. This little diagram really helped me to think about it a lot. If you've got continuous fuels, then you can see how those trees on the left-hand side are able to cope with fire, which stays down low to the ground. But if you've got all of these what they call ladder fuels, so you've got all this mid-story that's building all the way up, then the fire gets up into the canopy. And when a hot fire gets up into the canopy, of course, not only are all of the animals wiped out, but the trees are wiped out. And this is such a fantastic representation to demonstrate that. So on the left, where the bush is having regular fire go through and it's being maintained, compared to on the right, where it had been long unburnt, those fires back in 2019 caused devastation that is still not actually regenerating in the mature trees. They've been killed. Instead of the mature trees on the left-hand side, they're still going along just fine because the fire couldn't actually build up to the heat and get up into the canopy of a wildfire. Tristan then gave some terrific little recommendations, and so on Koala Gardens, the type of forest that I have here is the dry sclerophyll forest. Some of it is grassy forest and some of it is a little bit of a shrubby forest. But what you can see is that fire interventions should really be happening here. I would say if you take those two, 1 to 6 and 4 to 10, it's like every 2 to 3 years, there should be some maintenance happening on this property. And that's what I'm wanting to get into some discussions with this group who did this presentation about how we can get that going on my property to help my habitat here cope even better into the climate change. Now, if you look at this, this is a fantastic image because we've got a track with some cars on it. On the left-hand side, burns are done every 2 to 5 years through there. And you can see that it's a much more open forest. Now, this is better for koalas as well. Can you just imagine looking at how it is on the right with all of that mid-story that's all just chewing up through everything? It is easier for koalas to move through and live in that landscape on the left than it is that landscape on the right. And you can just imagine if a fire gets into there on the right, it's going to burn like the billios, as we say here in Australia. So this is a little kind of summary at the end of it. This alliance are aiming to identify areas of high koala conservation. Hey, guess what? That's me. Burn them to the right regular fire regime as part of a long-term bush regen plan. Incorporate the local Aboriginal community into those plans because the koalas are a totem species for the Bundjalung Nation, and create more climate resilient landscape. And of course, not just for the koalas, but all of the different species that cohabitate in the ecosystems that the koalas live in. I'm putting my hand up. That's definitely what I want to do. The next presentation I want to have a little bit of a chat about was by Dr. Dan Lunny. Now, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Lunny's work because some years ago I did a lot of work. I think it was around 2018 to 2020. I did a lot of work for Friends of the Koala with Dan Lunny and his team on the project that he's presenting on today. I manage the Friends of the Koala database, which is the largest koala database in the world. And I worked closely with that team for 2 years, and that's when I stopped actually doing hands-on koala care to work on this project voluntarily, getting in and sorting all of the data in that database out to a position where it can actually be effectively used by researchers. Now, there's lots of monitoring activity that goes on around the areas, and you can see that there's all kinds of ways that can happen. So I know that a lot of my amazing followers from overseas get concerned about not enough being done for koalas, and I'm with you. There is not enough being done. But what I also want to say is there is a lot being done as well, and it is complex. This is the Northern Rivers area that we're looking at here, and there are a lot of different regions that are looked after by different councils. It covers over 1 million hectares. That's a lot of area, and you can see the sort of the presence of koalas. And guess what? That thickest nice red blob, that's smack bang in the middle of where I live. So it's no wonder that when I do koala habitat restoration that I get a great koala response. But for all of those different councils and for all of the different people working there, it's a lot of land. So just trying to monitor and find out what's happening with koalas takes a huge, huge, huge amount of effort. In this presentation, there was some discussion happened about what we call the SAT surveys, the spot assessment techniques, and how they work. I always participate in these by allowing the surveys to be done on my property, and it is a huge task. It takes months with a lot of people going out and collecting all this data that then has to be put together and analysed. And as you can see, a lot of it's done by finding scat. Now, this particular chart is really quite heartbreaking. Each of those little charts inside that image are a different species. So we've got gliders and quolls and bandicoots and koalas. These are all native animals until you get to the ones down the bottom, the hares, the rabbits and the dingoes, which are 3 invasive species that are just so bad for our environment here, because they either predate on our natives or they actually, take up food sources and habitat that our natives need. But everything is plummeting. I'm just throwing this little slide in just so that you can see koala counts that have been done over the years. The green, of course, is where koalas are prevalent. It's so interesting when you see little isolated dots of koalas that are prevalent further to the west, going inland, both in New South Wales and in Queensland. What it tells us is that there used to be way more koala connectivity between the coast and inland. And again, the area that I live in, you can see it's pretty green. Now back to part of what Dan Lunny was presenting about, which part of what we were looking at a lot of different things, but one thing we looked at was release rates. Now what you can see is that that dark blue is Friends of the Koala here, and we were the only ones who were actually recording data about koalas between 1989 and 1992. It can be hard just to take something like this and really interpret what it means, because there can be so many different reasons for release rates going up or down, which can simply be a disaster that happens, an organisation getting some more facilities and being able to work more on a particular type of issue or whatever. But I've just kind of thrown that in there so that you can see that release statistics are, they are a discouraging thing. But releasing koalas, of course, is only a part of the effort. A huge thing that came out of this whole conservation forum was everybody agreed that vaccines are not the answer, hospitals are not the answer. The only answer is habitat and looking after that habitat to keep it robust and healthy. If you've been following me for some time, then you know that I'm always saying trees, trees, and more trees. Dwindling koala numbers are a direct result of dwindling habitat. Providing more habitat is the key to reversing the trend of dwindling koala numbers. So that's just a quick little overview of a bit of what went on the day. I hope that you found it interesting. I didn't give you any deep, anything that happened because there was so much that happened. But you have made it to the end of yet another Koala Gardens video, and I would love for you to smash that like button and write in the comments below. Keep the conversations going. Thanks for watching. There's lots more fantastic Koala Gardens video coming your way soon. Another way you can support what I do is hop on over to my Redbubble store. Anytime you're even thinking about getting yourself or someone that you love something. There are so many different, over 60 types of different merchandise on there with loads of fantastic Koala Gardens designs on them.